Welcome, everyone. This is our solid waste update. It is June 7th, 2022. It is 10:01 a.m. Attending in person are Brooks and Duncan. And I guess I could ask, is anybody on the line? See if Chris didn't call in. All right. And are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll start with our first business item, which is the construction projects 2022.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for having me. John Phillips for the record. I will begin with construction projects for 2022 with the Ramsey Z-walls and talk about this area for recycling that we had constructed to free up some other areas for garbage. The construction has been completed by TML Construction. It's 100% complete, and we did receive a certificate of occupancy, as strange as that sounds for a wall. But it does say that we're A-okay with the city to go ahead and start using those walls. And so the walls did turn out excellent. We have customers using the walls, and they're working very well. We did order some custom concrete blocks for certain areas. For some of the older areas where now we're gonna have customers going to existing walls that we're now transferring over to garbage so that the walls are sufficient height to safely throw the garbage into the trailer. So, yes, sir.
Why do they call it a Z wall? Is it shaped like a Z?
You know, it's kind of odd. It's not really a Z. It's more like 90-degree angles that are sort of a Z, but that is the reason they call them Z walls. So they stagger so that you can back 18-wheeler or trailers into each spot. So
And you got to stay in your lane.
You do, yeah.
Okay,
And
good.
so, yeah, they are sort of shaped like a Z, but not exactly like
Thank
a Z.
you.
So, yeah. We did order those custom concrete blocks for the certain areas and some additional safety signs. And like I said, we are signed off, City of Coeur d'Alene approved of those blocks and also approved of the signs. We do have the signs up. We're waiting for those blocks to arrive. With that, I'll move to the Athol rural site. So there was some surprises there. Kootenai County Solid Waste was working with JUB Engineering to look at ways to improve the Athol rural collection site. It was found that the local highway district has some plans for the realignment of Howard Road. Specifically, they're looking at shifting Howard Road to the east, which would actually end up behind our site. I'm still not clear, and I've been trying to contact Eric Shanley and our engineers as well to try to find out their finalized plan, because we're not sure if the original Howard Road will still remain a spur so that we could use that from the lower area. I'm hoping that we can work a deal to allow that to happen so that we could at least get trucks in down at the bottom and maybe customers in on the top, which could work out really well.
So there was, we just did a land use in this area, and it showed both, it showed the realignment of Howard, but it also showed that spur. So
It did show the spur
it did
staying.
show a spur, but it was a land use thing. So I don't know. We can try to get you the map from that project, but really Lakes Highway District is going to be the one. Bill, do you remember that? Where?
I do. I don't remember the details of it.
I don't know
Yeah.
if this is the same map, but I'll give that to you. This one's harder to read.
Yeah.
It's a bigger copy.
Yeah, this
you
is
very
the
much.
same because this is the thing that was just approved.
Okay.
Yeah, the
So
major subdivision.
On that particular copy, I highlighted the yellow highlighted areas, solid waste property,
Right.
and then the orange is where Howard's proposed to shift.
Right.
And so what I don't know is you can see Howard there to the west, the existing, and I'm not sure what they're doing with that yet. That's the part that I'm concerned about, what they may or may not do with that, so.
Right.
Anyway, with that, it's unclear when that change may occur or if it will actually materialize. And because of that potential change, the engineers and the solid waste department sat down and we decided that looking at the existing topography, the size of the site, that it would really be an exercise in futility at this point to try to make permanent long-term changes to the site until we know what's going to happen. So the only thing that I could recommend proceeding with is, and we will continue working on, is installing asphalt and redoing some of the grades at the bottom and ending up with better drainage. So I am going to continue working on that portion, but I will put off the idea of adding walls or anything for additional material until I find out if we have access at the top. It may really help us if we end up with access at the top and the bottom. So hopefully the change will actually in the long run help the Athol site. Any questions about that? Okay. So moving on to some details. So this is kind of a funny headline or topic on the agenda. So there's some details related to some coming up projects that I wanted to discuss. One is the Ramsey Transfer Station site improvements. So Kootenai County Solid Waste met with Jacobs Engineering, and we've been discussing ways to improve the functionality and the throughput, so getting more customers through Ramsey in a more efficient way, quicker. We've discussed ways to get the customers in and out faster by possibly avoiding the scales for some of the small loads, like 2-bag customers or people that have bagged garbage only. So we're hoping that we can come up with an idea for that. We're also looking at the need for 2 loading bays to top load transfer trailers. So Ramsey has always only had 1 bay where we can actually use equipment to load the top of a trailer, but that transfer station is extremely busy, really tight. It's hard to get all the trailers in and out through the one, we call it a tunnel, but loading area. And that includes the Z-Wall trailers after they've been top loaded by hand as customers throw their garbage directly into those trailers. They have to be brought around to the loading bay and then topped off so that we meet weights going down the highway. So it's efficient to haul them down to Fighting Creek. So having another loading bays will be critical to Ramsey's future. So we're having the engineers look at that.
This 2-bag idea, would you take them as they come in the regular line, or would you put over here like 2-bag line?
So what we're hoping, and the manager sat down, we talked about the potential of, and I'm not going to say this exactly what happened, but similar to a traffic circle. As you come into the transfer station, you could exit via the traffic circle and go to an area that would be outside of the rest of the operation and load directly into the top of trailers. And then you would leave having never had to have any interaction with a person other than whoever's watching the area. There'd be an attendant. But that would reduce all the traffic going completely through our site, or a lot of the traffic.
I can see people just saying, another traffic circle.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But the good news is if the traffic circle idea worked, you could come back out, enter the circle, and exit, hopefully back onto Ramsey without ever going through the site.
Just don't put art in the middle of the traffic circle that distracts. I've always wondered why they did that. So they're going around the traffic circle and there's fish going around and people are going.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've noticed, but they are filling that pit along Ramsey Road just to the south of the transfer station. And so as far as I know, that's a state-owned pit, but the city has something to do with filling it. And so I have reached out to the city to find out what the long-term plans were. I heard it could be ball fields over there, and I was inquiring, I've left messages about if there's any way we could get access to the road there right behind Winco. So I haven't heard back, but I'm hoping that we could get some kind of access, even if it was just to get our commercial big trucks out.
Right.
So
Any more uncontrolled bad gas coming out?
of Fighting Creek or at Ramsey?
Well, either one.
So at this point, at neither one do I know of any landfill gas emissions that are going off site. So we haven't received any complaints lately about Fighting Creek, and we haven't had any issues at Ramsey that I know of.
I know it's not on the
years
agenda.
and
How's
years.
the guy who got,
I have not received any other
Is he
email
still
or
working?
correspondence. What's
Oh,
that?
did you want to move on to Fighting Creek?
Oh.
Are you done, or you have more to talk about?
I still have some more on here. Yeah, I'll touch on that.
Okay,
I'll
good,
remember.
please.
Okay, you're talking about the technician. Okay. So anyway, in wrapping up the Ramsey transfer station and the site improvements, the engineer is going to work on a couple of different ideas to put together for options for county review. So once we get to that point, I'll keep you posted. So moving on to, do you have any questions about Ramsey? So south cell permitting, Jacobs Engineering has recommended that, this is a detail related to that we clear up a right of way. That's an issue down at Fighting Creek where there was a deeded access right that went across kind of the front edge or the highway side of our property. It's pretty old, like 100 years old or so. I'm currently working with Kevin Howard from Worley Highway District on trying to form a solution to this because we built some wetlands in that area, I think a little over 10 years ago, and that road goes right kind of through that area, and so it doesn't work out very well. So we're looking at shifting that to the north. I did meet with Kevin Howard, looked at that area, but not only does his board have to agree to the change, but also the state has to be involved because there's a bridge at Belgrove Creek that plays into how far that access point could be in that, for that speed limit set on the highway in that area. So we're still working through those details. And so I'll need to get approval from both of those entities before coming up with a final agreement for you guys to take a look at. Also, in FY23, another item that I wanted to bring up was, depending on the economy, we might rebid that landfill storage building that came out so expensive and we opted not to move forward with. If the economy is still booming, we will probably hold off and wait and do that in FY24. The design of landfill phase E3 must occur in FY23, so the landfill is running out of space as we speak, just from the volumes of garbage going in there. And so the engineers believe we have space, I think, until 25. However, you always want to build these things at least a year in advance in case you have a hiccup. So design will be FY23, build is planned for FY24. Any questions about any of that? Okay, so now I'll move on to Fighting Creek, and during the landfill gas part, I'll bring up the stuff that some of those questions you were asking, Bill. So garbage volumes are up at the landfill. We're currently still building a 10-foot lift, which goes pretty fast across the landfill. I've worked with our landfill manager recently to put together a plan on how to construct the landfill itself this season, including lift sequencing, road extensions, grades, stormwater control, and the landfill gas expansion so that we have better control this winter. Some of these gas system improvements that we will be working on this year will be installing a new buried 12-inch main vacuum line from south to north across phase E2 of the landfill. This line should greatly help with available vacuum. So if you think of the landfill, we have a perimeter system that goes around it pretty well, but what we don't have is a cutoff line that goes across. So if anything happens on the perimeter system, it can cut gas flows, and so that makes us vulnerable. So we want to put in a jumper line across the middle and make sure that that keeps us with sufficient vacuum, especially before those construction seasons happen, because they'll be working on the gas system during the E3 construction season as well. So working on that ahead of time. We also plan to install several new gas collection lines in trenches across E1 and E2, which are phases of the landfill, to aid in gas collection. We'll do those over the next several months. This is our construction season. It's the best time of the year to do that is typically June, July, August, September. So we'll be getting those in there. And then in regard to the employee that we had at the landfill gas flare that had suffered an injury, he's back, 100% recovery, he's doing well, everything's been good.
Now he's growing his eyebrows back, right?
Yep, he is, and everything's going well. He's
Good. That's all I need to know.
Yep.
I just want to make sure he's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
What's that?
I said that's all I wanted to know.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then also in regard to Fighting Creek, I wanted to move to staffing changes. So recently, we have a new landfill manager that was promoted. We lost our former manager. And so the new manager's name is Will Marks. Will has 5+ years of experience with the solid waste department. He started as an environmental technician and then became our assistant landfill manager and has now moved up to the landfill manager position. Will's an excellent employee. I feel confident that he's going to do a great job in this new role. We're looking within the department. I advertised within the department for the assistant landfill manager. I have some interest by a couple of employees that have greater than 20 years experience at the landfill, and so I feel optimistic that one of those two individuals will end up being able to fill that role. Any questions about any of that? And I did want to touch on overtime usage. Overtime usage at Fighting Creek has been higher than normal. I think we're a little over 150% of the overtime budget at the landfill. I wanted to give you an update in regard to our A budget because of these things. The Solid Waste Department did obtain budget performer reports from the auditor's office, and based on current projections, the reports show that the department will remain under budget for the remainder of FY22, and this is even with similar projected continued use of overtime. So I'm pretty confident, and this is basically because we're short on other employees. We have open positions, but I'm very confident that we'll remain within budget.
How many open positions do you have?
And I'm going to get to that too. I'm coming to that
Okay.
too. So, Any questions about the overtime usage of Fighting Creek? Okay. So moving on to transfer station operations, we're very busy at the transfer stations this time of year. Safety is paramount, and so I want to bring up a reminder to the public that early summer is typically one of our busiest times at the transfer station. You want to watch out for heavy equipment while on site, and we'll do our best to watch out for you as well. We will do whatever we can to streamline the process for all of our customers in a safe and efficient manner. Customers should expect sometimes to have longer waits than normal just because we have higher traffic volumes than normal. We will do everything we can to minimize those wait times. Moving on to staffing levels and recruitment at the transfer stations, the solid waste department, like other departments, has experienced quite a bit of turnover in the past couple of years. Recently, we have experienced another wave of resignations. Currently, we have 7 open full-time positions as well as 4 seasonal positions within the department, so we have 11 open positions. And although this is concerning, we have so far found ways to continue our service at fairly normal levels. If we lose a bunch more employees, I might have to come back to the board and talk to you about those service levels and what we might be able to do to make changes, but I'm hoping that we can continue with the levels we have and work through this. So we're actively trying to recruit people as best we can. I did meet with HR to look at ways to possibly improve recruitment. Some of these ideas included freshening up our job descriptions, which I'm currently looking at, as well as adding video clips to the online recruiting materials so that people would have a better idea of what they're looking at when they see a title such as solid waste technician or environmental technician or something, or equipment operator, so you'd know exactly what you're doing. Overtime usage in FY22 at the transfer stations will likely end up above normal, but at this time it doesn't look horrible at the transfer stations due to the shortage of employees. We are working through that, but again, it's not terrible at the transfer stations. Any questions about any of that information? Okay. So moving on to rural sites. As you know, I like to touch on rural sites at every one of these meetings because we had some abuse in the past, in the summer especially, and then we've been working with the sheriff's department to try to curb that abuse, and it has been very successful. This past fall, winter, and spring, the problem has really been minimized, and a big thanks to the Sheriff's Office for continuing to police our rural collection sites and educate the public. It's definitely working. There's less to pick up there. I drive by Kidd Islands every day on my way to work, and the site has looked much improved. I did have to talk to a couple people this morning that were dumping large items on the ground, but they were more than willing to take them to the Ramsey transfer station after I discussed that with them. So typically, we see the worst abuse of these sites from May through September, so we're in our season now. When we see this kind of abuse this year, we did install extra containers during the Memorial Day weekend at both Blue Creek and Wolf Lodge because those are troublesome areas, and as far as I know, there was not a lot of material left on the ground at those sites, and so we worked through that. We did not see the abuse this year that we have in previous years. Probably likely due to the Sheriff's Office hanging out in the vicinity. So big thanks again to them. Solid Waste Department is still working on the installation of some live feed cameras at the 3 southern sites. We're actively pursuing Sunup Bay at the moment. We want to get the cameras at Sunup Bay working first. It's one of the most abused sites on the south end. And once that site is working well, then we'll continue working with the same company to get the other sites up and running. But we want to see the product we're going to get, make sure we get license plate recognition, and that we can that it's working really well before we commit to the dollars for the other 2 sites. Any questions about rural sites? Okay. No. With that, we're going to move on to our final item, which is Solid Waste Statistics 2022 Compared, and Angela Bergson will do this portion of the presentation.
Hello, Commissioners. Angela Bergeson, Business and Finance Manager, for the record. A lot of the stats really go with what JP was saying as far as the tonnage that we're seeing. It's pretty neat, though. We are encouraged. So Ramsey, this is a comparison between January and May 2021 to 22. At Ramsey customers, we are down actually 12.28%. And I'll touch on that. Tonnage also down 8.95%, which is good because we have been at some very elevated levels for, well, quite a while, at least 3 years. A lot for 2020, as we know. That was when we really saw a big spike. For Prairie, same thing. Customers are actually down 8.99%. We're starting to level off. Tonnage is down 3.55% from Prairie. Rural site, customers are up only 1%, but tonnage is down 17%. And that is not seeing those big loads and the abuse at the rural sites. That's really tied to that, and it speaks volumes. As far as the customer level, of course, that's just Chilco and Athol sites, because those are the only sites where we can keep track of that number. But then, okay, so that's what comes in at the sites, the transfer stations and the rural site. But at the landfill itself, so the amount of waste coming in there, the tonnage is up. So it's 4.46% tonnage-wise at the landfill. And here's what we're seeing. A big part of it is that now we have the scale at the landfill. So those big construction projects where we have, more than 10 loads, like the Costco building, for example, that's bypassing the transfer stations altogether and being brought directly to the scale at the landfill.
It's got to be a huge money savings.
It's money savings. It's yes, for the hauling of it, the handling that material, and all those trucks that we didn't have to see at the transfer stations.
So it sounds like the scales will pay for themselves like this, not too long a time.
It's big. For example, so like in March, this isn't waste brought from the transfer stations to the landfill. This is just directly delivered to the landfill by commercial users. In March, it was over 1,650 tons.
Wow.
March alone. So that started June of last year. And so just when I looked at 2021 numbers for the waste, it was 3% of the waste went directly to the landfill. And that was just from June. So it'll be really neat when we see the end of 22 and see more use and see just how much of a percentage went in that way that bypassed using the transfer stations completely.
Are you guys still able to keep track of demolition waste going directly to the landfill?
Yes, really that's all that we're taking as far as directly there is the demolition waste, those large loads.
Yeah, just waiting for that to slow down. Then we know that things will turn around, but yeah.
There have been, of course, some houses that were demoed, which is typical this time of year. Of course, the Costco building, like I said, that's a big one. That's a lot.
It is such a heartbreaking, all those beautiful bricks and everything just torn up and all the metal in there. It's like, oh.
So that we're seeing, that was part of our May numbers, as well as they're still hauling that. So that will likely see a good amount for June as well. For March, though, that was a building off of Ironwood. I forget exactly where, but.
Well, and there was also the donut that Cannon Hill did, the donut shop at off of 95. Yeah.
What's somebody just clearing that off for a new building, or?
I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen afterwards, but yeah, it was.
At first, I saw that there was signs for remodel.
Right.
Well, that's a little more than.
My wife said, I said, they tore down Gross Donuts? And she goes, yeah, it's gone. I said, and she said, well, I know you've been being good because you weren't stopping by there for a donut on the way to work.
Yeah.
Luckily, they saw Post Falls.
Well, things change.
But that's really about it as far as numbers. I just wanted to touch on that.
Excellent.
I did have a question for the next meeting. If it would work or be of interest. I know a lot of times when we do statistics, it is the tonnage and customer count, which is of course very important to know the usage and levels. But if we wanted to do something more on the financial side and take a look at where we at budget wise on the expenses, I was thinking I could compile some of that, or if we want to hold until end of year.
It's up to you. I don't mind either way.
I don't mind the wait because we've got a lot to do between now and then.
Sure. Okay.
And if there's one department that I think is just going along fine.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's solid waste, I said.
Well, and the other thing too is when we get out of budget season, we'll go back to our every single month auditor gave us where everybody was.
Okay, good. Okay,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure on
But
that.
thank you.
Yeah, and then we've got the KPIs, of course, on the website, which is all up to date,
Thank you.
so,
Okay.
yeah.
Very good.
Well, with that, that concludes, if you don't have any other questions, that would conclude our solid waste update.
Okay. Anything else, Bill?
No.
All
You
right.
want your roadmap back?
Sure, I'll grab a look at
Yeah,
this.
you can take it. All right, public comment? Nothing online, nothing in the audience, so, all right, 10:27, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.